Networks connect, communities care. What keeps you there, why you keep coming back, is the web of relationship. You feel seen, you feel loved, you feel cared for, you feel these are my people. Work with the people who show up. Community is a web of relationships around a shared purpose.
So Fabian, welcome. Very thrilled to have you. We have Fabian Pfortmüller, who's really a founder himself, but you also, what I see is, kind of an expert specifically on community weaving, building, so everything to do with community and meaningful relationships. And I would love to start just perhaps asking you, what is a community? What is community building, weaving? What do we mean by that?
Thanks for having me. With community means many different things to different people. So this is just my definition, or the definition that we work with, which is a community is a web of relationships around a shared purpose. So people come together around some possibility, some shared purpose, and it's a web of relationships that forms and that exists over long periods of time. So for us, a community is a web of relationships around a shared purpose.
I love it. And since we're focusing on entrepreneurship and really purpose and impact, I think this aspect of community is so important. So perhaps next, let's talk about why it really matters. Why is it an essential part of entrepreneurship in general, but also if you want to create a positive impact in the world, why does it really make sense to focus on community?
Yeah, my sense is community can be a really powerful way when you are trying to reach more people, but you do not want to or do not have the resources to engage with all of them yourself. I think of community as a source of energy, and where if I wanted to speak to 100 people, I can go and talk to 100 people one-on-one, which will take me at least 100 hours. But what if I would instead start bringing them together and allow them to meet each other, and would allow them to come together where they show up not just because they know me or they know my organization, but because they have a sense of shared purpose, and they also have a sense of relationships. Mm-hmm. And in the end of the day, I think a lot about what are sources of energy that will last for a very long time. And as entrepreneurs, we often put so much energy into our projects ourselves. We work a lot of hours. We care a lot about these topics. But yet, in the end of the day, our energy is limited, and we want to reach so far. And what I found is that relationships, care, and trust is one of the most sustainable sources of energy there is. Like, if we can be with others and we know that they care about me, if that's a place where I feel I belong, I'm willing to show up and I'm willing to support. And so it unlocks energy, it unlocks momentum. And as social entrepreneurs, I think that's incredibly powerful, because if we want to do something around, let's say, climate, me by myself, I can only so go far. But if I bring a community together around this topic, I think together we can go much, much further. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, super interesting. And so I think the what and the why is very clear now. How do we actually do it? So if we want to build meaningful community that's not just short-term or transactional, how do you actually do it?
Yeah, I'm still trying to find that out myself, how it works. But I have some hunches, and I have learned some things. And maybe first about language. So I both used the word community building, but most recently we started to use more the word of community weaving. And I think language, when it comes to community, matters. It matters because originally I used to think a lot about community building, but I realized that community building assumes that community is something that can be built like a house. You just need a plan, and then you first start with the foundation, and then you build this on top, and then this. And as I've been working with communities for almost 20 years, I realized that's actually not true. Community is a living organism. community is more like a forest or more like a garden than it is a house. And so in our language, to remind ourselves of this property, of this characteristic, I think it's important to be intentional about what words we use. And so we started to use the word community weaving, which kind of is much more organic. And I'm trying to also always think back about what are metaphors that remind me that in the end of the day, we're working with a whole bunch of human beings that are coming together, and they're fluid, and it's all a kind of a living process. So that's one thing. We developed a framework that we called the community weaving framework. It has 5 elements. And for us, these 5 elements each answer the question, how do we weave healthy community? As you were said, I think it's quite easy to bring people together once. It's quite easy to do something in the short term. Where many communities fail is figuring out how to sustain over long periods of time, where really also the biggest impact exists, both for the wider world as well as for the people in the community. And for us, these 5 elements are: first, the fire. We think of every community as having a fire in the middle, some kind of thing that attracts us, some source of energy, some source of clarity. Like, what is it that brings us together? Why do we come together? These are questions such as, what's our purpose? Who is it for? What are our values? How do we want to create value with this? What's the history? What's the context? So those are kind of some of the elements that can go into fire, which is kind of at the very center of a community, something that attracts us. The second is the web. As I was mentioning in the definition, for us, the essence of community is that communities is relationships, and it's a web of relationships. Often what people do is when they start community, they bring people together much more in a central way. Imagine like a wheel where the convener is at the center and everyone else is the spokes of the wheel on the outside. That's not a community. Why? Because people are not connected with each other. They're just connected with the center. That's how traditional convening is. Like, I invite everyone to come to a conference, and they're there because I bring them together. A web is much more interwoven, where everyone is there, and the web is really what holds us together, what strengthens us. In community, we often talk about the sense of kind of almost like what brings us there and what keeps us there. I sometimes think of the fishing of like, now I can't think of the word in English right now, but basically
you throw out the bait.
Yeah, exactly.
Bites,
Exactly. And then there's the anchor that keeps you there. And with community, what we found is it's often the fire, elements in the fire that bring you there the first time. You're like, oh, that's an interesting purpose. Oh, these are interesting people. Oh, this is like an interesting value proposition. But it's not what keeps you there. What keeps you there and why you keep coming back is the web of relationships. That's what holds us together. It's because you feel seen, you feel loved, you feel cared for, you feel these are my people, and we have a sense of true relationship with each other. Okay, so that's the web of relationships, and we can talk more about what it means to take care of a web of relationships. The third element is rhythm. We found that I used to think a lot about what do we organize in a community, what kind of experiences. But the longer I do this community work, I realize that even more important than what we do is how steadily do we do it? What is the rhythm? What's a healthy rhythm? And how can we make sure that it really comes together very, very consistently over time? If you look at all the major religions, things happen extremely consistently. Like in the Christian tradition, you go on Sundays, in the Muslim tradition, it's on Friday to go to prayers. Why? Because so much about community is like a muscle. And I always go back to this quote by Anthony Cabral is his name. And he said once, community is like a muscle that grows when we practice together. Community is like a muscle that grows when we practice together. So when we do things at the beginning, it's kind of strange. I don't know how it works. I go to a meeting, but then when I keep going back regularly, I'm like, oh, that's how we do things. That's how culture grows. That's how rituals grows. That's how experiences grow. They just become kind of second nature. And the rhythm is so important to make sure that these things don't stay one-offs, but they become a consistency. I think a lot also these days, nobody has time for anything. And that's one of the biggest hindrances for communities. So when people think about, is this worth my time? With young communities, people are always like, is this community still going to be around in 3 months or 6 months? Or is this just like a one-off? And consistency and rhythm helps people feel safer, I think. That they know, okay, this is worth my investment because it seems to be that it happens again and again. So that's rhythm. Element number 4 is we think of is circles. Basically, what we found is that any community that we've ever worked with has 3 concentric circles at the same time. At the very core are very few people who make things happen. They take responsibility, they organize things. Around that is a middle circle of the people who show up actively, the active members. They participate, they raise their hands, sometimes they volunteer, but they show up with like good spirits. And then there's a large outer circle that you might call the friends or the opportunists, people who sometimes show up, never show up, once showed up and you've never seen them since then. And what I learned over many, many years is that having a large outer circle is not a bug, it's a feature. And I used to think that my role as a community weaver was to try to convert the outer circle into inner circles and to push them in. And it never works.
Oh, that's interesting, because that was also, kind of my, I guess, conventional thinking, right? That's like thinking about conversion. The bigger the outer circle, the better, and the more you can convert them. So it's super interesting.
Exactly.
So it's not like a funnel. You have to kind of change that.
Because in the traditional, especially as entrepreneurs, on the marketing side, we probably are familiar with like the funnel metaphor, which is you try to reach a lot of people, and then some of them convert in one step, and then some convert into a second step, and then some convert into, I don't know, becoming your final customer or whatever. And that's not the case with community, because what I've learned is that people in the third circle do not want to be converted. For them, it's just like they don't have time. Something in their life right now is it's not aligning. And what I learned instead is to focus my energy as the community weaver on the 2 inner circles. Work with the people who show up. Work with the people who want to be there. And that actually grows the circles. Because what a healthy community has, it has like almost like it has a magnetic core. It has a strong core where you'd be like, when you're in the outer circle and you realize, wow, the people who go regularly, they're having fun. They seem to really like each other. There's a good culture. There's a good vibe here. That's what attracts. That's what attractive. Versus like me calling, be like, Jessica, I haven't seen you in a couple like months. Why don't you come? There's kind of like there's a lot of guilt being used also sometimes with to like convert people or pushing. A lot of pushing energy does not work. That's kind of one of the core principles of the 3 circles. One of the other elements is that, almost on the flip side of it, is that I'm learning that it's really important to think about reciprocity, because if you think about the most inner circle, the people who make things happen, it is a reality that in most communities, very few people do most of the work. And they do it because they love it and because they have passion about it. Very often that's unpaid work. And what happens is, if we, the collective, we don't take care of them, eventually they burn out. And when they burn out, the community suffers or actually like stops. And if we want to have a healthy community, meaning a long-term community, a sustainable community, we actually have to make sure that these people are healthy too. And we have to somehow find a way to resource them or to find some kind of form of reciprocity Do we have money? Is that a possibility? Often it is not. Can we make sure that we say thank you to them? Can we find other ways of just like checking in with them, of like how their well-being is? Can we do rotating leadership? Those are some of the elements.
Yeah.
The fifth element that we work with is called the spiral. And basically the idea of the spiral is that like everyone coming into community goes through a journey. How you end up in a community is a journey, but also how you leave a community is a journey. And what happens in a community is a journey. And ideally, that journey is an intentional journey. And beginnings are incredibly important at the community. Like the first few weeks, the first few months, the first touch points is how our expectations get set, that allow us to understand how we're supposed to show up, that give us a sense of the cultural values. And then ideally there's almost like thresholds, choices we get to do of like how we get to show up. And what we also found is like many communities think about how people get in, but they don't think about how people get out. But most people don't stay in communities forever. They at some point leave. So what's the way out? And that's basically what we're trying to think through when we think about like, what is the spiral? What is the journey in? What are some important rituals or moments as part of the community experience? And then what's the way out? So those are the 5 islands: the fire in the middle, the web of the relationship that keeps things together, the rhythm that keeps us kind of in the flow, the 3 circles that reflect on how people show up differently, and then the spiral that reflects the journey.
Wow. Thank you so much. It's super interesting. Really appreciate you sharing all of that. You mentioned something very interesting, which is this building meaningful relationships, building trust. Can you talk a bit more about what you've seen works really in practice, and perhaps also what are some of the factors that make relationships fail or that don't help to build that trust over and sustain it, right? Because it's also about sustaining that over a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think that's where a lot of communities when we were talking about definitions, what is a community? Sometimes we also talk about the difference between community and network. And there's this quote by Henry Mintzberg, which I love, which is very simple. It says, communities care, networks connect. Networks connect, communities care. And it basically speaks to the difference of how do we show up in the space? Is it connection? Okay, I kind of know who you are. We're kind of connected in a superficial way, or is it care? And I think it really comes down to what is the intentionality in the space. Is it on the level of connection, or is it in the space of care? And care just means a culture that values that. It needs the people at the center role modeling that. It needs a certain level of safety. If I go into a very transactional, networky space, I'm not going to feel safe to connect with an open-hearted way. But if I show up somewhere and I'm welcomed in a really kind way, and I really resonate with the values in the space, okay, I'm going to be willing to show more of myself. I'm going to be willing to listen more deeply. And I think those are some of the elements that help people connect, is like listening, like spaces that are really value centric and have like strong positive values. And I think it also has a lot to do with like, what are spaces that prioritize being over doing? So many in the social impact space, there is a certain sense of urgency towards doing, which I understand too, because we have, problems in the world we're trying to change. Yet from a community point of view, like spaciousness, slowness, intentionality with just being together is what makes actually relationships meaningful. While if we come together and we're just like, okay, let's work on something together, let's work on this outcome, we create on the surface, on the appearance, we create things, but actually they're often quite meaningless in value. While if we just say, hey, if we just came together and we spent the weekend together being and just enjoying each other's company, very likely some very interesting conversations would come up. I find that a lot of community spaces or a lot of like networking spaces are overstructured. We actually don't need much structure. All we need is like something to drink and something to eat and a nice space to hang out with, you know, and a welcoming host. I think like hospitality is one of the most undervalued skills, I think, when it comes to social impact. Creating hospitable spaces, welcoming people with an open heart, making sure people have something nice to drink. That opens people's hearts, you know. And I think I said this before, but maybe I'll say it slightly in different words. I pay a lot of attention to role modeling. Role modeling is one of the strongest forms of leadership in community. If you are trying to create a community of care, if you role model care, if you show up with care, other people around you will pick it up and will start to embody it too.
And it's this element of culture that you mentioned, right? You're building a culture. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Maybe just pointing out a few resources if somebody is watching this or listening to this and wants to check out the framework that you shared. Where can they find out more about your work?
Yeah, sure. If they want to look for the community weaving framework, just Google community weaving framework. Those are the 5 elements I mentioned. We also created a previous framework. So the community weaving framework was co-created with Aaron Dixon, Michelle Bachmann, and Zita Magnusson, and it was designed by Alfred Carlos and Lynn Trin. And then a couple of years before, we co-created a framework called the Community Canvas, which is simpler, and also some people find it maybe a better starting point at the beginning. So if you just Google Community Canvas, you'll find that, and that was co-created with Sascha Mombarts and Nicole Luchsinger. And I do a lot of writing about community. So if you're just searching for my name, I have a Substack called Entangled. I think that's it.
Great. Thanks so much. And we'll also link to those resources.
Great.
Thank you again, Fabian. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
A quick note of thanks and a small invitation. If you're enjoying this podcast, subscribing is one of the easiest ways to support the work and help these conversations travel further. I really appreciate you being here.